Welcome to the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Lace up those boots and sling on the pack for a romp through trails, short and long. With your host and Renaissance man, Doc. It's time to embrace the suck.
Welcome back to another week on the trail. I'm Doc, and this is the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Let's start off with a reminder. If you are enjoying the podcast, help us out. Take just a minute and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you are not enjoying the pod, well, just go ahead and keep that to yourself. All right, on to this week's very important topic. We are all huge fans of the outdoors, and I know we all want to do our part to conserve these natural areas and make sure that they are around for future generations to enjoy. And that is why we have an entire episode devoted to Leave No Trace, complete with lots of stories and examples. Helping us out with this topic is Leave No Trace trainer, Heather Kovach. Welcome to the John Freakin' Muir Pod, Heather.
Well, thanks so much. It's great to be here. I've really been binging a lot of adventure media lately. I think because of being cooped up due to COVID and having to cancel some trips last year, all I've been doing is reading books about the trail and watching documentaries about the trail and, of course, listening to the John Freakin' Muir Pod. So it's really exciting to be here. And honestly, I'm not sure I belong on the same podcast with some of the other guests that you've had. So it's truly an honor.
Oh, it's great having you. I'm looking forward to what you have to share with us about Leave No Trace. And I'm glad you've been binging adventure media, because there will be an adventure media recommendation at the end of the episode.
All right, I'll be ready.
Okay. So you have listened to the pod before, so you know that there is a segment towards the end where I'm going to turn to you and ask you for your pro tip insight of the week. And that's a little tip, trick, or insight that you can share with our listeners to make their next outdoor experience that much more epic. So don't be surprised when we get there.
All right, cool.
Okay. And we go strictly by trail names as much as possible here on the podcast. So I was wondering, I know you've done some hiking out there. Have you picked up a trail name?
I have, yes. So last summer, I did manage to go on a backpacking trip with my sister. And while I was on that trip, she gave me the trail name Lion. So I do go by Lion, and it sort of came about because we were chatting on the trail, as you do, and I was trying to be supportive and encouraging, and I don't remember, I was saying something like, "We're almost there," or "You can do it," and she just stopped and looked at me and said, "You're a lion hiker." And my first thought was, yeah, I'm a lion, I'm majestic, and I'm fierce. And then I was like, oh, wait, no, that's not what she meant. She meant I'm lying to her right now about how close we were to our destination. So I sort of picked that up and ran with it, though, and became Lion.
Okay, so it's very important to distinguish the spelling there. It's not Lion, it's Lyin apostrophe.
Well, to hear my sister tell it, yes, it would be lying, but I prefer lion.
Okay. All right.
I like the fierce and majestic angle.
Got it. So as long as you pronounce it, without the G, I mean, you're just fine. So
right. Either way, really.
Got it. Okay. Hey, another feature we've been doing this season is the must bring gear review. And here's how it works. If you were to let a stranger pack your bag with pretty much generic gear for a multi-day hike, what is the one specific piece of gear that you would insist on being packed? And if you've got a particular brand for that specific piece of gear, even better. So Lion, what is your must-bring piece of gear?
Ooh. All right, so I can think of two that are really key for me. One is my water filtration system. I use a model system, and it's MODL, but pronounced model. And I think it's really great because it's got the filter is integrated into the bottle. So for me, I have bad shoulders, and so squeezing really just is painful for me, and pumping is really painful for me. So with this integrated into the bottle, basically all I got to do is I take the bottle, scoop it into the stream or body of water, put the cap back on, and the filter is actually in the cap. So I attach my hose to that and I can just suck as I go. And so for me, it's a time saver, and it helps my shoulders out quite a lot because I had a pump for a while and it was killing me. But I also want to talk about a piece of gear that has more of a leave no trace aspect to it. So if you are someone who squats to pee, and you know, we backpackers love to talk about our bodily functions. So if you're someone who squats to pee, I really recommend a Kula cloth. I would never go anywhere without it. It's a great piece of gear to take with you. I started out with a bandana, and those have some drawbacks to them. So the Kula cloth is, you know, keeps you dry and dries very quickly. And I love that piece of gear. I go everywhere with it. Day hikes, absolutely everything.
Okay, and how do you spell that?
Kula, Kula cloth.
Kula
There are
cloth.
some other brands out there, but that's the specific brand that I use, and I've been really, really happy with it. So shout out to the folks at Kula Cloth.
Okay, very good. Are you sponsored by them?
I wish. Maybe now I will be.
Okay, fingers crossed. Very good. All right. Hey, before we get to Leave No Trace, let's talk about kind of the origin story for Lion on the Trail. Where did you grow up? What's your background? Your family? How do you pay the bills? And how did you get started in outdoor activities?
Sure, that's a lot of questions, kind of all in one.
Yep.
But I live in Northeast Ohio. I've lived here my whole life, um, and I live on a small hobby farm. We've got about 5 acres. I live with my husband and two of my three kids. My oldest daughter is grown and on her own. My middle son is actually moving out next month, so that's kind of a big deal. And it's a good thing. Like, it's time. It's not like I'm, kicking him out or anything. It's just time. Um,
Congratulations. I know our goal as parents is economic independence for our kids. So nice job.
exactly. Yeah, it's a big milestone. So we're excited about that, but also it's bittersweet, right? So, and then
Sure.
I
Yep.
have our youngest is a junior in high school, so we still have her, but teenagers are off running around doing their own thing. So we're in a lot of ways feeling like empty nesters, and
Hmm.
it's kind of a strange place to be. Um, but so I've kind of always been into the outdoors. Big environmentalist. I actually work as an environment health and safety manager. So I work in a manufacturing plant, and part of my job is to make sure that not only is everybody going home at the end of the day with all their fingers and toes, and we're following OSHA regulations, but also making sure we're following EPA regulations, and that we're conducting our business in ways that are respectful of the environment. So it is something that I'm really passionate about and that I deal with on a daily basis. Um, so as far as my outdoor experiences, I know growing up, we sort of did some car camping. I used to always, my mom would always tell me that if I went outside and was playing, if I didn't get dirty, I didn't have fun. So I was always just running around, playing in the mud, playing in the dirt, and really have always, since I can remember, just been at my happiest when I'm outside. Um, I think, as I got older and my sister and I got older, other interests kind of took over. But I always really kind of still in the back of my mind, I wanted to get involved in hiking and backpacking, and really didn't have too much opportunity until a couple years ago. So as my kids were growing up, we would go camping, we would go day hiking, and I tried to get them outside. And I was actually a scout leader for a lot of years while my son was growing up. So had some good experiences there, but I could never get my scouts to go backpacking. And every year, as we're planning the activities, once you get to Boy Scouts, the boys are planning their activities. And so every year we'd have our planning meeting, and I would say, "Are you sure you don't want to go backpacking? Like, really? Don't you want to try backpacking, guys?" And like, they never wanted to go. And it was so disappointing because it was really me that wanted to go, right? Um, so after I retired from being a scoutmaster, actually one of my good friends a couple years ago, 2018 this would have been, she called me up and said, "I've got this crazy idea. I want to go backpacking in Yosemite. Are you in?" And I said, "Sure." Like, I I love adventure. So she could have called me up and said, you know, I'm going to go to Bolivia, or I'm going to go to Detroit, or I mean, truly anywhere. And I would have said, yeah, let's go. I'm in. So
I
she
hear the
said,
backpacking in Detroit is wonderful this time of year.
yeah, it's really something to see.
Yes.
Um, so truly, she said, let's go have an adventure. And I said, yeah, let's do it. So that was my first exposure to backpacking, was in 2018. We did a week in Yosemite. We went from Tuolumne Meadows to the valley, and just, as you know, incredibly breathtaking, life-changing, being there. And so from there, I was hooked, and have been a pretty serious hiker since then, and have done some really great trips, either just for a few days or, you know, week-long trips.
Hmm.
So I got the bug pretty bad.
Nice. And those trips, have they been in the Sierra or elsewhere?
So I did the 2018 trip in Yosemite.
Hmm.
2019, the big trip was in Colorado. We did a segment of the Colorado Trail where it overlaps the CDT. Um, and then I've done some shorter 3-4 day trips in Virginia, in New York, went to the Adirondacks, and summited Mount Marcy, which is the highest point in New York. That was just a great trip, and that's where I picked up my trail name too. So, but the Sierra just keep calling me, and I was supposed to go back last year, and that trip ended up being canceled due to COVID. And honestly, it was mainly because I actually had COVID this time last year. I was an early adopter because I'm just hip like that, I guess. So
Cutting edge.
yeah, that's me. But it honestly took until about October before I really kind of felt like myself
Oh, wow.
again.
Okay. Hmm.
So I took some shorter weekend trips to see how I was doing, and I just went, you know what, there is no way I can handle being at altitude. So I ended up having to cancel that trip, and it just broke my heart. You know, I still was able to make some lemonade, but it really broke my heart. So um, looking forward to getting back there this year now. So
Yeah. Get your trail legs under you and get back out and do the JMT.
yes, yes. So we couldn't get a permit to do the whole thing. I was kind of hoping, but we are planning to do the southern half in August. So
Oh, what part of August?
we will be hitting the trail around the 20th of August, I believe. 20th,
Okay.
21st is I think what we're looking at. So I'd have to look at my calendar, but I know it's right in there. So we're planning to take our time. We've got a couple 0 days planned, just because when are we going to get another opportunity? Who knows? So
Right.
um,
Yeah, I got an invite with a couple of buddies of mine to do the southern half of the JMT starting at the end of July. So
oh,
I'll
we'll
be a few
just
weeks
miss
ahead of
each
you.
other.
Yep.
That's a shame. That's a shame.
Yeah, you know what? There's a lot to be said about the northern half of the JMT, but I find the southern half of the JMT to be the most beautiful and most spectacular. So you're in for a real treat.
I honestly couldn't be more excited, and I hear Whitney calling my name. She's just, you know, screaming for me. So I'm coming. I'm coming.
It's gonna be epic. So tell us a little bit about how you became a Leave No Trace trainer.
Yeah. So this is actually recent for me that I decided to take this step, and it's in part because as I've gotten more involved in the hiking community and some of the conversations that are happening in the different groups on Facebook, um, very often people will ask a question about bear canisters or fires, or they'll post a picture of a cairn, and cairns, as you probably know, set off some very, very animated discussions. And I wanted to be able to participate in those conversations in a way that was helpful and well informed, rather than, you know, just kind of taking that approach that some people do, which is just kind of like, hey, you dummy, you know, cairns aren't cool. So I wanted to contribute in a more meaningful way to those conversations. And I also wanted to feel more comfortable too on the trail when I see something that doesn't feel right or doesn't sit with me, to be able to talk to people in a well-informed way, and really just to help me kind of look at my own practices and see where maybe I could improve. So I was looking for a class to take because I am participating. There's an organization called Hiker Babes, and they do a challenge every year that you have different activities to complete, and one of the activities is to take a class, and it could be anything that you want, orienteering or how to pack a backpack or whatever strikes your fancy. And so I was just kind of looking around for something to take, and I went, oh, I should do a Leave No Trace class. Like, to me, that's just such a no-brainer, because I am so passionate about it already anyway, and I just felt like it was a good fit. And I do a lot of training in my job also, so to take a course that could help me be a better trainer overall, I felt like was just such a natural fit. So I'm excited to kind of be better equipped to spread the gospel about Leave No Trace.
Okay. And what is the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics? Is that where you took your class?
Yeah, so I actually took it online, like everything is online nowadays. But the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics is the organization behind Leave No Trace. And their mission is to protect the outdoors by teaching people about how to enjoy nature responsibly. And they do that by conducting research. So it's not just opinions, but there's scientific research behind the message that they're spreading. And if you go on their website, there's tons of information there about the studies that they've done, really looking at how people are managing their waste and what what influences visitors' ability to follow Leave No Trace ethics. And so there's just tons of fascinating information out there. They really do a great job of educating the public about Leave No Trace and what it's all about. And I like to think of it as sort of a spectrum. So Leave No Trace it's not a set of rules, right? It's a set of ethical guidelines. And so we have a choice every time we go outside. We can have no impact on the environment, or we can have a lot of impact on the environment. And it's up to us and the choices that we make while we're out there. So where do we want to land on the spectrum? And that's really what it comes down to, I think.
And the danger is that if everybody takes the extreme side and leaves a large impact on the environment, then what we're experiencing today is going to be a very different place in a generation or so.
Absolutely. And, that's something that I'm very sensitive to. Having grown up in Northeast Ohio, I live very close to Cleveland, where the Cuyahoga River very famously caught on fire 51 years ago. And, the city of Cleveland lives with that reputation still to this day, right? And that was very influential on me growing up, knowing that I lived in this great place that I loved, and yet everybody just thought of it as this just, horrible, polluted, rotten pit, basically. And I really saw how that affected the city as I was growing up. And I saw how that affected people's ability to enjoy the outdoors. There's been a massive effort to clean up the Cuyahoga River, to clean up Lake Erie, but it's truly only within the last 2 years that you can eat fish from the Cuyahoga River again. So it's taken 50 years to recover from that. And so I'm painfully aware when I go outdoors, it could take 50 years for the environment to recover from what I do today. That's huge to think about.
Yeah, it's pretty safe to say that if your river catches on fire, then you've been leaving a big trace.
Very big trace.
And not no trace.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that all really came about because of, businesses not disposing of their waste properly, and it was
Right.
all flowing into the river. it was a pretty ugly scene there for us for a while, and it's really come back, and I'm so proud of how far we've come. I love our town. I love the area that we live in. I think it has a lot to recommend it. But boy, that was a tough one to come back from. It's taken, my whole lifetime.
Hmm. Now, how many guiding principles of Leave No Trace are there?
So there are 7 principles.
Okay.
And they are plan ahead and prepare, because everything you do starts with planning. And then we have travel and camp on durable surfaces is the second principle. The third principle is dispose of waste properly, and that's one that I get real excited about. So I'm looking forward to kind of digging into that one. Fourth is leave what you find, and that kind of ties in with the notion of take only pictures, leave only footprints, and we can dig into that. 5 is minimize campfire impacts. I know that's huge, especially in the Sierra.
Mm-hmm.
Principle number 6 is respecting wildlife, and then 7 is be considerate of other visitors. So there's a lot tied up in each of those 7 principles, and they all kind of interrelate with one another. And I think that it's been broken down in a beautiful way that makes it simple for anyone to understand and follow.
Okay, fantastic. We're going to take some time and do a bit of a deep dive into each one of those, and maybe hear some examples and stories of what not to do as we go through these.
Great.
Okay, so let's start with plan ahead and prepare.
Yeah, so I am a big planner. I love planning for trips. I love spreadsheets. I love, as I said, adventure media. So reading books and watching YouTube videos and documentaries. So
Yeah, I think that's
reading.
half. I think that's half the fun, actually. Um, as you are planning for a big through hike, just looking at all those different resources and kind of calculating where you're going to be and how long it's going to take and what kind of food and what kind of equipment and how much is my bag going to weigh. I mean, that is, you kind of get lost in that whole process, because even though the hike is going to take 5 to 7 days, or if you're doing a long trail 5-6 months, the planning for it can take just as long, if not longer.
Absolutely, and I agree. That's where a lot of the fun is.
Hmm.
And I used to always tell my Boy Scouts, before we would head out on any kind of a trip, we're always going to, whether it was for the day or whether it was for a week, right? We're always going to have a plan A, B, and C. But then we also have to be prepared to make up plans D, E, and F on the fly, because you never know what's going to happen when you're out there. So you need to be armed with enough information that not only do you have a plan, but you also have the ability to adapt when things don't go according to plan, which of course they rarely do. Um, so I always make an effort to really have a plan and then a backup plan. Um, but even so, there's certainly have been times when I, maybe didn't plan ahead as well as I should have. And, even just simple things like when my kids were growing up, we'd head out for just a picnic or a day hike. And, we'd get to a spot and say, okay, let's sit and have lunch here. And we're having lunch. And then we realize, oh my gosh, I forgot to bring a trash bag. And so I'm here with, all of our food wrappers or whatever, and I don't have a trash bag. So it can be something as simple as that, where you can really make your day easier and have potentially less of an impact on the environment just by bringing the things with you that you truly need. So it can be as simple as a day hike. And I can say, so just recently, actually, back in about December, I went on a hike here locally in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, which we're very fortunate here that we have a great national park within about 30 minutes of my house, basically. And so I went there for a hike with a few friends, socially distanced, of course, and didn't really, it was kind of a last minute thing. My friend said, hey, I'm going for this hike. And I said, sure, I'll, again, I'm always up for an adventure. Yeah, let's go. And I didn't really plan ahead for it. So I did not, even though it was December and I should have known, did not bring my yak tracks with me. I didn't have any sort of, crampons or anything. And here I am on a hike in December, and it was a, fairly hilly trail. And we came to this one section of trail where it was a pretty dangerously steep hill, given the amount of ice and snow that was on the trail. And everybody's trying not to, fall. And I'm going, oh boy, I can't break a hip, you guys. I gotta climb Mount Whitney, And so we had to make a decision at that point. What are we gonna do? And we ended up having to kind of go off the trail to an area that did not have any snow and ice, and it was more leaves and things you could get a better grip on. And we all kind of spread out, so we weren't we were doing the best we could, I think, with what we had to work with. But I felt terrible because I saw just about a month ago a picture that the Conservancy for the Cuyahoga Valley National Park shared on Facebook, and it was of that very spot on the trail. And they showed that it had been widened since I was there in December. It had been widened from about 4 feet, which is its normal width, to 20 feet, because people in that area have been going around that spot, either because it was snowy and icy or because it was very muddy. And so, yes, it was a safety concern, and we did the best we could, we thought. But when you have that many people, and it is a very popular trail, when you have that many people all making the same choice, you end up having a very serious impact. And it could take, 10, 20 years for that section of trail to recover. And my heart just sank when I saw that. I thought, oh my gosh, I contributed to that. And if I had planned ahead on that hike, if I had had the right footwear with me, I could have just stayed on the trail. And that really just opened my eyes, I think, in a way that they had never been before. So it's one thing to kind of intellectually know, yeah, I need to plan ahead and bring the right equipment, but to see that visual of here's what happens when you don't do the right thing. I felt awful. It just broke my heart.
Now, Lion, I'm glad that you're sharing personal experiences of where, oh my gosh, I could have done better. Because then I don't feel so bad about myself, because I know I strive to leave as little impact as I can, but I know that there have been times where I haven't always made the right decision. So it's nice to know that even a leave no trace trainer has some of that in her background. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're all just trying to do the best we can, right? So
That's right.
I'm here to maybe just kind of help people think about the choices that they make, so that we can, when the time comes, hopefully do better and do the right thing.
Right. And so if you don't plan ahead, if you don't bring that trash bag, then there's the potential for trash to be on the trail. If you don't bring the right equipment, there's the possibility of having to take an alternate route when you encounter a difficulty, and then that leaves an impact on how wide the trail might become. Or if you don't bring the right equipment and you become injured, then you've got a whole rescue operation coming into that space, which also has an impact.
Absolutely.
Got it.
So there are so many things that can go wrong that all can have an impact.
Okay. Should we move on to the next one?
Sure.
Okay. So the next one is travel and camp on durable surfaces.
Yeah, and so I already touched on that a little bit with my last example of plan ahead and prepare. So, but there are so many other ways that applies to, the things that we're doing in the outdoors. So one of the things that really is kind of one of my pet peeves is when people cut switchbacks. So instead of staying on the trail for the whole switchback, they'll take a little shortcut, and you end up with these sections of trail where, there used to be plants, and now you've got this area that's just soil. And because it's steeper in that area than what the trail designers had planned, now you've got erosion problems. So that's certainly a pet peeve of mine when I see folks doing that. And I know it's really tempting to, take a few less steps, but we have to really stop ourselves and say, no, stick to the trail. They put it there for a reason, and let's respect that. But I think, again, sometimes even despite our best efforts, we might make mistakes. So, and I'm thinking here of this past October. Um, I went with my friend Sue, who's kind of my main backpacking partner. We decided to take about a week-long trip to the Red River Gorge in Kentucky, and I was really excited to hear somebody talk about that on the pod just a couple
That,
weeks ago.
that's right.
Um,
Yes.
and it's a beautiful, beautiful spot.
Was that
Just
Jupiter that
Oh yes, it
talked
was.
about
It
that?
was
That's right.
Jupiter.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and it's just a gorgeous spot. It's been called the Grand Canyon of the East, and it's just got these beautiful sandstone formations, arches that you would expect to find out west, and then here they are in Kentucky. So just incredible views, great place for rock climbers, incredible place for hikers and backpackers. And so we decided, yeah, that's fairly close. Let's go. It was sort of our consolation prize since we ended up not hitting the JMT. And while we were there, we took a sort of an unofficial side trail to a place called Indian Staircase, and it's a great scramble up this sandstone cliff, and I mean you're really kind of clinging on for dear life in a few points. Although we when we were in Yosemite a couple years ago, we did climb Half Dome, so I did have sort of a frame of reference. So it was like, well, hey, I've climbed Half Dome, so this is fine, right? But it was still, it was a pretty good climb. So we climbed up Indian Staircase, and there were some other folks that were, in their maybe early 20s, young, fit people, and they got partway up and they said, oh, heck no, we're not doing it. And then there's, Sue and I, and we're, definitely women of a certain age, and we're just like, come on, we can do it. And we climbed up this thing and just had a total blast. But we got to the top and we turned around to admire the view, and what we saw was a storm coming in. And we thought, oh no, we have to climb back down because the trail didn't go through. We had to climb back down this sandstone cliff that was about to get rained on, and we're thinking, oh, this doesn't end well. This is not going to be good. So we decided we can't do that again. It's a safety concern. We're going to be very exposed if there's lightning. We're going to slip and fall if it really starts raining. So we had to find an alternate way to get back down. And what we ended up doing was we did find a way to kind of tramp through the woods rather than going through this exposed rock area. And the best way to do that was to disperse and still try to stay on hard surfaces. So if we had a choice to walk on rocks rather than trampling over plants, but then also to spread out a little bit so that if we were walking on plants, we weren't both walking on the same ones, because that's how you end up, cutting a new trail. All it takes is a few people, and you can start to see that footprint left on the landscape, and we didn't want to do that. So we spread out and we stuck to the rocks as much as we could, and we actually ended up leading another group out too that was kind of in the same position, and we said, follow us, we'll get you down. So it was important to me that, again, we were in this position, we had to make a decision, but we could do it in a way that was going to leave as little impact as possible.
Yeah, that's a great example of the spectrum you were talking about, from, leaving absolutely zero trace whatsoever to leaving a huge trace. And, the leave as little trace as possible would have been going back down the sandstone, but that would have been a very dangerous situation because of the rain and everything else. And so you had to make a decision on the fly that incorporates safety as well, that you're going to take an alternate route out, but you're going to do so in such a way that you're going to avoid stepping on the plants, or if you have to step on plants, you're not going to, the person behind you is not going to step on the same plants. And so there's the spectrum.
Exactly. And there's a lot of other things that apply there. There's another friend that I hike with here locally, and I've really been working with her to kind of retrain her brain, because her mindset, always growing up was, don't get dirty, don't get muddy. And so when you come to a section of trail that's very muddy, the temptation is to go around the mud. And again, you end up with the same situation that we had on that section of trail that I talked about earlier. So that's something she and I were discussing on our hike just this past weekend, was like, nope, go right through it. Just go through the mud. We're out here to enjoy nature. And right now nature has given us mud. So we're going to just enjoy it for what it is. So again, you have to learn to embrace what the trail is giving you, and that's what it was giving us yesterday, was lots of mud.
Embrace the suck.
Exactly. Exactly.
Very good. Lion, you have inspired me, because in the past I have been unwilling or reluctant to step in the mud. This summer, when I come to mud, I'm walking straight through it.
Yes, thank you. I hope you'll think of me every time.
Absolutely. I may be cursing you as I'm walking through it, but I'll be thinking of you.
Perfect. I'll take it.
Very good. Okay. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get to the last 5 of the 7 leave no trace principles. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back.
All right. Sounds good.
And welcome back. We are speaking with leave no trace trainer Lion, and we're talking about the 7 principles of leave no trace. We covered the first 2 in the first segment, and we're going to get to the third one right now. And you'd mentioned in the first segment, you're fired up about this one. This is dispose of waste properly. So I can't wait to hear some of the examples here.
Yeah, so I get really excited about this one, not only because, as I said, my background as a Clevelander, where we just had businesses dumping waste in our river and setting it on fire, but also because in my day job, when I'm not hiking, one of the things that I deal with at work every day is our hazardous waste programs and our other waste disposal programs and recycling programs. And it's just something that I, have studied a lot over the years. What happens to our waste? Where does it go? How do we take care of it the right way? So both personally and professionally, it's just something that I get really excited about. And I had some folks at work kind of making fun of me the other day, because we were talking about a building project we have going on, and I was kind of getting really excited about, oh, how are we going to deal with the waste from this project? And they were like, lady, like, what's the matter with you? Calm down, So it is something I get really excited about, because it's something we don't ever want to talk about, right? Nobody wants to talk about, where does our garbage really go, or where does my bodily waste go? And yet we all make it. And so I think we gotta talk about it. We gotta make sure we're handling it properly.
So around the holiday season, as others are opening up their gifts and are excited about what's inside the packaging, you're excited about what we're going to do with the packaging when we're all done. Very good. Got
Yeah,
it.
that's absolutely very true. You have no idea how much you hit the nail on the head with that one. That's pretty great. So, so one thing that's kind of, I think, an ethical dilemma when we're heading out on a backpacking trip, especially, is how are we going to package our food, right? So we either have our pre-made dehydrated meals, which I personally like to take them out of the pouch that they come in and put them in a freezer bag, because it's less weight. And then actually, I don't take the first trip I went on, I took one of those bags that it came in, and I just used that over and over again. So I only took one of them with me.
Smart.
And then I actually stopped doing that, and now I use a padded mailer to insulate my freezer bags. So I just keep reusing the same padded mailer until it just gets like too gross. And then I then I can, basically wait until we order something online and it comes in a padded mailer, and then I use that one. But it's just a little one of the like kind of 5x7 ones.
Yeah, the fifth meal you have in that tastes like the other 4 previous meals as well. It's kind of like a bonus.
Yeah, exactly. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
That's right.
So we have a choice to make when we cook our meals. So do I want to essentially cook my meal in that freezer bag, or do I want to cook my meals in my pot? But if I cook it in my pot, now I have potentially wastewater to deal with when I'm doing my dishes. But if I'm cooking in freezer bags, now I'm probably generating a whole lot more plastic waste than I might otherwise if I, packaged it maybe in a different way. So again, this is one where I don't know that there is a right or wrong answer, but it's something we really have to think about and plan ahead for. So we know how much waste am I going to generate, and what impact am I going to potentially have? Am I going to be in a really delicate environment where even if I disperse my wastewater when I'm doing my dishes, it could potentially really have an effect on that environment? So if that's true, then yeah, I'm going to use my freezer bags and avoid doing dishes. Some other places, it might be better to cook in your pot and, package your food in a different way that's going to reduce your plastic waste. So um,
So I,
I
I
don't have,
can't I
go
can't
ahead.
remember if this was Jupiter or if it was Legend who said this. Legend's episode just came out today on the same day that you and I were recording.
Okay.
But we were talking about cold soaking, and we are talking about, I don't know if it was and it could have been Little Skittle too. I could be completely confused here, but she was talking about having a peanut butter jar or a Talente ice cream jar as your cold soaking vessel. And after you eat what's in there, after you've done your cold soak and you've eaten what's in there, you clean it by taking some water and putting it in there and kind of swirling it around and then drinking that. And so there is no wastewater. It all goes through you. So you don't have to deal with the waste until later on.
Until later, right. And
Yes.
I think that's a great way to do it. And I have not gotten into cold soaking yet, but I actually plan to this year. I've got some cold soak meals that I've prepared, so I'm looking forward to trying them out. And I've got my jar ready to go. So
Yeah, and some of my listeners may fall off their chairs when they hear this, but I am planning to do the same thing. I'm going to give it a shot. I've been convinced by the last three guests that I've had and their stories of cold soaking. So I'm going to give it a shot as well.
I'm excited for you. I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback on how that goes. I actually made, and I don't, it could end up being terrible. I haven't tried it yet, but I made a dehydrated coleslaw. And I enjoy coleslaw, and I know after a few days on the trail, you really start to crave fruits and vegetables. So I thought, well, I'm going to give this a shot, and we'll see how it goes. So um, I'll I'll follow up with you later and let you know how
Okay.
that turns out. But yeah, so that's going to be one of my cold soak meals, and honestly too, because I'm so sick of tortillas. If I have to eat another tortilla on the trail, I swear I don't know what I'll do.
Too much of anything and you'll get sick of it. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
what it is.
Absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely. So the other thing we sort of hinted at is, when we're talking about waste, is after we consume our, cold soak coleslaw, what happens to it then? Um, and I think it's really important to know what are the requirements of the area that you're visiting. Some places you have to pack out your toilet paper. Some places they say it's okay to bury it. But even when you bury your toilet paper, it can take 5 months or more for it to decompose. So honestly, most often my choice is to just pack it out anyway. And I'll pack it out. I've seen all kinds of, different ways of doing it, but what I've finally kind of settled on is I just take a dark colored grocery bag and put it inside of a gallon freezer bag, and then maybe put a little baking soda in there. And so then I'll put it inside the grocery bag, inside the Ziploc bag, so it's all sealed up and you don't have to see it. And that seems to work pretty well. But I did also just order, and it just arrived a few days ago, a Kulo Clean bidet. So I'm looking forward to trying that out too. I was pretty intimidated, but there's some good videos out there actually that explain really well how to use them correctly. And, there's just this poor guy, like, squat. I mean, thankfully he has pants on, but he's like squatting and kind of showing you how to use it. And it sort of took the intimidation factor out of it. So I'm gonna try that and see if I can go like zero TP on the JMT this year. That's my goal.
Lion, I'll be honest with you. I'm scared to type that into my Google search bar.
Yeah, who knows what you might actually find.
So
Yeah,
you'll have to
mercifully.
come back on. You have to come back on in the fall and give us your review of the Kula bidet.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I will let you know how I feel about that Kulo Clean bidet. So, um, the other thing that really was intimidating me was realizing that in the area around Mount Whitney is that you have to pack out your waste completely, and that was something I didn't have any experience with either. So I've been doing some research on okay, well, what is a wag bag and how does that work, and that takes some of the intimidation out of it too. It's just, again, there's some good material out there where people just kind of say like, here's what it looks like. It's, I was picturing like almost like pet waste bags, and thankfully it's not that. So, um, so I think that's going to be okay.
Yeah,
But
we've
I
been through
just,
that. We've been through that area a couple of times, and our trick is that we, right before we get to that zone, we do what we have to do, and then we make it through down to Whitney Portal, and that's worked the two times that I've been through there. But I think it was it Jay Wilson who was a guest talking about his book, and he was talking about where he got stuck on top of Whitney or almost at the top of Whitney, and he had to go, and he had his wag bag, and he was worried like you were that it was going to be the size of a pet waste bag, but evidently it's pretty it's pretty good size, and you don't have to have exact aim. So he did all right. The only problem was there wasn't a lot of cover up there.
yeah, that's another consideration too. And again, this is especially for people who have to squat to pee. That can be really challenging, just all the time, trying to find a way to be discreet about it. So, that's something that, probably about half the population doesn't really have to think about or worry about. But it
Yeah,
is a concern.
yeah, Jay's tip for that when he had to go was if there was no cover, he would just point up into the air, and anybody that was look that would glance at him would see he was pointing up into the air, and they would look up to what he was pointing at. But I'm not sure that would work if you were squatting. I think
Yeah,
people would say, well, "Why is she squatting?" And you wouldn't be able to deflect attention that way.
no, there's really kind of nowhere to hide. So,
Yeah.
we'll have to see how that goes on Whitney this year. But again, it's important from a leave no trace standpoint to know what the requirements are of the place that you're visiting and be
Mhm.
respectful of that, because there's nothing worse than coming up across an area near a campsite that's just filled with discarded toilet paper and seeing that human waste lying around. And unfortunately I have encountered that, and it's upsetting, and it's gross, and it detracts from your experience. So it's
Yeah.
important, and not only your waste but your pet waste too.
Hmm.
Can have giardia in it, can have worms in it. I mean, things that will really affect the environment. So you might be thinking like, oh, it's natural, it breaks down, but it's sometimes a question of what am I carrying, or what is my pet carrying that I don't want to spread around in this environment.
Right. Little Skittle she camped with a bulldog, taking her bulldog on a few trips, and had basically saddlebags for the bulldog. And in one side was the food, and on the other side she would put the waste. So she said it basically balanced out throughout the trip. There'd be less food but more waste.
That makes a lot
just
of sense.
yeah, yeah, it's very good. Okay, hey, let's move on to kind of the opposite concept, and that's leave what you find. And I've got a great story for this after you explain this.
Great. So leave what you find, as I said earlier, really is just kind of that concept that I think a lot of us are familiar with of, take only pictures, leave only footprints. But it sounds very simple, but then it actually can get pretty complicated. So, for example, I have some personal struggles with this one because I love rocks. Like, I love them. I have a huge collection of rocks. It's embarrassing how many I have. And I've really had to start to kind of force myself over the last few years to say, you know what? No, I don't need every single rock. It's okay to, I don't have to take them all home with me, right? And I've always kind of grown up knowing that there are certain places, like as a kid, visiting petrified forest, knowing that no, you absolutely, there's no way I'm taking anything from here. As cool as the petrified wood is, like it's so protected and so precious, you have to leave it where it is. In Yosemite, it never crossed my mind to, pick up a piece of granite and take it home. So there are always certain places that, even to me, the, rock hound that I am, I can say, no, I need to respect this and leave it right where it is. But then why do I have that perception that some places are more worth preserving than others? So I have to really examine that within myself. Where does that come from, and why do I think that it's okay in some places, and I know that it's not okay in other places to do that? And that's something that I struggle with in myself all the time. Like, oh, but it's so pretty, I want to take it home. No, leave it where it is. Take a picture. And it gets really tricky. I also learned recently that it is illegal to take feathers, bones, or shells of any bird that is native to the United States. So every little kid that goes around picking up feathers that they find on the ground, technically they're doing something illegal. Now, I don't think anybody's coming for them. But I was very surprised to learn that. And I understand why. And it actually comes from back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when people wore hats and they put feathers in their hats, and they had all these elaborate, arrangements of feathers in their hats. And we were actually hunting birds to extinction for the sake of our hats. And so the government actually had to step in and say, like, time out, we can't do this anymore, you guys. And so now it's illegal to have feathers that, you find on the ground. And my goodness, again, like, I know I sometimes find them and pick them up. So things like that, where it's surprising the level that you can go to with these things.
Interesting. There, in Los Angeles, there's a law on the books in terms of littering, and there's only two things that you can throw out of out of an automobile or a moving vehicle. Do you know what those two things are?
I can't even begin to imagine.
Water is one,
Okay.
and then the other is chicken feathers.
What?
Yes, because back in the day, I'm sure it was around the early 1900s, they would be transporting poultry in the Los Angeles area, and of course feathers would be discarded or would fall off as they were driving. So the original law said it's littering unless it's water or chicken feathers.
That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, strange
Fascinating.
Laws. Yeah. So my story is talking to Legend. When he was on the Great Western Loop, he came across, he's on the trail, he came across some moose antlers. And so he was going to pick those things up and bring them with him. But to his surprise, they were still connected to the live bull moose that was laying down. And he found himself in short order being charged by this bull moose. And if you want to hear more about that, you'll have to listen into the episode.
Now I can't wait to hear that one. Yeah, I can't imagine that went over very well with the moose.
Just leave it alone. Leave what you find.
Yeah. I mean, they do shed them every year, but I guess he wasn't quite finished with them yet.
Not quite yet.
Oh, that's amazing to me.
All right. Should we go on to the next one?
Sure.
Okay. So this is minimize campfire impacts.
Yeah.
And we all love a good campfire out on the trail.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, here's another thing that I've really started embracing as a backpacker. Truly, by the time you roll into your campsite and you make your dinner and you get everything all set up, I'm done for the day. Like, as much as I love sitting around a campfire, I really don't have the energy or the interest most often at the end of the day. So in those areas that are, very protected, for example, I think most places along the JMT, it's no fires over 10,000 feet. In Yosemite, it's less than that, 9,600 if I'm remembering correctly. So, even if I wasn't in those protected areas, I really would just kind of have no interest at all. But there was one trip that when I was in Colorado, actually, with well, maybe this friend prefers to remain nameless because of what I'm about to say. We had a fire at our campsite, and
you can go by trail name. if she has a trail name.
She doesn't have one yet,
Oh, okay.
so
Dang it.
I should have given her one on this trip.
It might be, you could give her a trail name based on this story, probably.
Well, based on this story, yeah, we might have one before I'm
I'm going
done
to try and find
talking
one
here.
for her. Okay,
Okay,
go ahead.
excellent, excellent. Um, so we wanted to stay up a little bit and enjoy looking at the stars, and we had this beautiful campsite, and we said, yeah, tonight's the night. We're gonna sit up and have a fire, and we made a fire, but oh man, was it freezing cold. So the fire got pretty big because we were really using it for warmth. And we weren't thinking about the fact that at a certain point, we're going to want to go to bed. And we've got this big old fire going. And so at a certain point, we were like, oh God, what are we going to do? There's no way we're going to stay up until this thing goes out. And I mean, we had like just these massive logs in the fire. And so we kind of tried to spread it out as much as we could. And then my friend, God bless her, before I really realized what was happening, she actually picked up one of these just massive logs that was burning. She picked it up from the non-burning end because it was so big, half of it was like sticking out of the fire ring, and she picked it up from the non-burning end and just like chucked it into the lake. And I thought, oh no, like this is bad. This is really bad. There's no way we should have done that. So not only did I just, feel like kind of a jerk, but also I realized like we really should have, again, planned ahead better. When we started that fire, it would have been much better if we had, taken our bear canisters and filled them with water so that we had those handy when the time came to put out the fire. But we just didn't do that. All we were thinking about was that kind of romantic ideal, right? We're going to sit by the campfire and we're going to sing songs and we're going to look at the stars. And we weren't really thinking about the ramifications of, okay, well, what happens after when you're done with the fire? So my advice to everyone, listening and watching is don't pick up an entire burning log and chuck it into a lake.
Is that your pro tip
choice.
inside of the week?
I hope I can do better than that for a pro tip.
And your friend shall be forever known as Ember.
Excellent. Oh, she'll be thrilled. I can't wait to give her the good news.
And some people may wonder, why is it that fires aren't allowed at a certain altitude? And it's really not because of fire danger. Although, as you were telling that story, whenever we build a fire, I get really nervous about not wanting to cause a forest fire, right? I get really jittery if it's a little bit windy and wonder, I can't let this spread. I don't want to be responsible for the next natural disaster out there. So that always makes me a bit uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
But when you're above 10,000 feet, there are no trees up there, or very few trees. And so you're not looking at starting a forest fire up there. But the reason is that it's a very delicate ecosystem, and what wood is on the ground is part of that ecosystem and part of what helps the cycle of life basically up there proceed. And if you take the wood out of that cycle, then you're damaging the ecosystem up there. Do I have it about right?
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to understand is that it's not only about preventing forest fires. It is in many ways about protecting the environment. Mm-hmm. And I did think it was interesting. I watched the video recently to get my California fire permit for my trip this summer. And in the video, they actually show and they tell you that what you should do is dig out a 10-foot diameter around your fire so that you have bare soil, which sounds good in theory. But then I started thinking, well, aren't you damaging all that soil, though, when you're doing it? And depending on what environment you're in, that could be a really, really bad call. So I understand from the standpoint of preventing forest fires, which is what that video was geared toward. But that really kind of raised my leave no trace hackles a little bit too on that one. So a lot of it is really about protecting those delicate soils that you have in those alpine environments. I mean, they just take a long time to develop. All those little gnarled trees that you see, those are 1,000-year-old trees, and it's just taken them that long to get that big and, to come through and start damaging the soil that they rely on is just really a very bad call.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the next one, my story for the last one could apply to this next one as well. Respect wildlife. It goes to those, picking up those moose antlers and legend.
Yeah. So the rule of thumb to follow is when you are around wildlife, it is truly a rule of thumb. If you can hold out your thumb and cover up the animal completely, yeah, exactly, then you're okay. But if you hold out your thumb and you can't cover up the animal entirely, you're too close. And
Yeah,
I
legend may have been able to cover up just maybe an eyeball of that particular moose. The rest of it was visible around the outline of his thumb.
Now, on the one hand, I'm sort of terrified for Legend, and on the other hand, I'm a little bit jealous because we've spent a lot of time as a family vacationing up in Canada, and every time we go, I say, okay, this is the year. I want to see a moose, and I have yet to see a moose. So I really still want to see one, but I don't know if that's the way that I want to do it.
Yeah, be careful. One of our former guests pointed out that there are more deaths from moose attacks than there are grizzly bear attacks up in Alaska.
I can believe that 100%.
So the moose is the deadlier animal. Be careful.
Yeah, I'll definitely keep that in mind. When I see one, I definitely want to see it like at least this far away.
Right.
And that also kind of ties in with, using bear canisters. And that's another thing that I think people often ask about is, boy, do I have to bring that bear canister? It's so heavy. And we all get focused on our pack weight, right? Um, but to me, I'll bring my bear canister even when I don't need it because I feel that it's so important. Even if I'm not in an area where there are bears, there are still going to be, around here in Ohio, raccoons, opossums, even chipmunks and squirrels, and there's going to be some animal that's going to be trying to get into your food. I know in the Sierra, the marmots are actually more of a nuisance than the bears. So it's important to keep in mind too. Yes, we want to keep our food away from the bears with our bear canisters, but I just think they're a great tool everywhere. And to me, it's worth the extra weight to make sure that you're keeping your food away from animals and not luring them into your campsite.
Right. Yeah. Two follow-up parts on that is when you're coming up from Guitar Lake and you're going up the switchbacks and you get to the sign for the turnoff to Mount Whitney. It's 1.9 miles, the sign says, and a lot of people leave their backpacks right there. They're not going to carry their backpacks up to Whitney. They'll go up unpacked, so they don't have to carry the weight. But there are some very fat marmots that live in the neighborhood of that sign because as soon as those packs are left, they are digging into those bags. So if you have a very expensive bag and there's still food in it, I would suggest taking that with you.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very good thought. And I remember too, when we did our trip in Yosemite a couple of years ago, we took a little detour off the JMT and went up Clouds Rest, which was just an absolute highlight of the trip. And sitting on top of Clouds Rest, having our lunch, and there's a pair of ravens that clearly lived up there, and they were just having the time of their lives. They would, jump off the mountain and catch the air. It was great fun to watch them flying around. But as I'm sitting there eating my lunch, I mean, one of them just kept like kind of hopping over closer and closer and closer, and you could see that they were definitely very used to being around people up there and getting some tasty morsels. So um,
Yeah, they're no dummy. I've heard that ravens have the intelligence of a 4-year-old. So
yeah, I can absolutely believe that
yeah.
because this one that was hanging out with me eating my lunch. Now, granted, it was a really cool experience to have my lunch, with a raven on top of Cloud's Rest. But yeah, I could see that it was definitely kind of trying to calculate. Okay, how am I going to get some of this?
Right. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, go back to, is I'm going to get on my soapbox here because if you're in an area that requires a bear canister, like the John Muir Trail, bring a bear canister. Use a bear canister. And it's not I'm not even concerned about your protection. I'm concerned about the bears, because if they get into food, they will keep harassing backpackers and hikers out there to get more food. And if that happens, then they have to put the bear down. And so because you've been too lazy and didn't want to take a bear canister, you are now responsible for the death of that bear. So take a bear canister if it's required.
Absolutely, so important. You know, that's one of the reasons we go out there, is because we want to have those opportunities to view wildlife in its natural environment. And if we're taking actions that are harmful to them, then honestly, I just think we've got no business being there. So, you know, to the people who the bear canister haters, I'm with you. Just suck it up. We got to carry those extra few ounces. And I know a lot of people say, well, can't I, you know, bring a bag, or can't I bring, you know, something else? And well, no, I mean, in the Sierra, where are you going to hang your bear bag, right? On the JMT, you're above 10,000 feet. There's no trees. Where are you going to hang it? So,
Yeah,
yeah, suck it up. Bring your bear canister.
I think 80% of the southern half of the John Muir Trail is above 10,000 feet. There are no trees to hang a bag.
Yeah, so that's to me absolutely critical. I want those bears to continue staying exactly where they are, and I want to continue visiting them in their home environment, and viewing them, you know, from afar. Um,
Thumbs up.
and that's yeah, thumbs up for the bears.
All right. Hey, that brings us to number 7 of the leave no trace principles, and that's be considerate of other visitors. Do I have to do that one? Do I have to follow that one?
Well, you know, I'm afraid so. Yeah, Doc, I'm gonna have to insist on that one. And honestly, this one is pretty simple because it incorporates all of the things that we've already talked about. So, you know, and I think that's part of what I like about the leave no trace principles in general, is that they really all do play very well together. They all tie together. But considerate of other visitors, I think one of the biggest things is to know, for the trail that you're visiting, know who else is going to be on that trail. So in other words, can you expect to encounter, um, you know, mountain bikes? Can you expect to encounter horses or pack animals? And if so, know who has the right of way. That can be so important. And so for those who don't know, in that situation, the horses or the pack animals always have the right of way. And it's so important, to be respectful of their space on the trail. We just never know. Horses, especially, I don't have a lot of experience being around other pack animals, but horses especially can really, you know, spook if they don't like what they're seeing. So, you know, be very respectful, give them the right of way. And then, so everybody has to yield to the pack animals. And then, you know, bikes should yield to people. So, it's very important to make sure we know, you know, who's got the right of way in those situations when we've got a shared use trail. And then also, you know, when you're, encountering other hikers on the trail, if the trail's pretty narrow, and it is in some places, you know, how do we deal with that situation? Who's got the right of way? And so the general rule there is whoever's going uphill has the right of way. And that's just because they're using so much energy. And if they're really in a groove, you don't want to mess with their rhythm. So let them keep chugging up. Now, I'm usually the one, if I see somebody coming the other way when I'm going uphill, I'll say, oh, thank God, I can take a break. You know, and I'll pause and let them go.
Lion, you beat me to it. I was going to say there's an exception to the rule, and that exception is if you ever come to be on the trail, it doesn't matter which direction I'm going, uphill, downhill, whatever, I'm going to stop and let you go by so I can get a rest.
Absolutely. And that's certainly your personal choice. But, you know, another one that really kind of irks me is, people who bring music on the trail. And this just happened to me over the weekend. You know, I was enjoying just a beautiful solo hike in the national park, and there was a couple of folks that were coming towards me, and they had a speaker playing music. And I don't know if they realized how far away it could be heard. It really carried, and I mean, thankfully it wasn't terrible music, but it still took away from, you know, I was there to hear the birds and the wind, and
And
not to hear.
not Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, absolutely. All due respect to Led Zeppelin, but that's not what
True.
I was there for,
That's
right?
right.
So,
That's right. Yep.
if you got to have music, or if you can't miss an episode of the John freaking Muir pod, right? Which who can, right? Um, Take headphones and ideally only wear one of them so that you can still hear what's going on around you. So if you do have somebody saying, hey, look out, or on your left, or, help, I need help, you can still hear what's happening around you. It's important to be aware of your surroundings. So, but that's one that just really, really irks me is when people are bringing their music on the trails. Um, but also just leaving their trash lying around and things like that. Now, I will say one positive experience that I had was this past summer. And actually, I can't believe we've gotten this far into our conversation without talking about this. So my husband and I are high pointers, which means that we have a goal to visit the highest point in each of the 50 states. Now, there are certain states that I know that I'm not likely to do. Denali, I think, is probably beyond my reach, both from the standpoint of just logistics, but also from the standpoint of I just don't know that I really have that much interest in, those mountaineering types of skills. But I think there's probably 48 that I can do. So this past summer, again, because like we were just going stir crazy being at home, like everybody else, we decided to take a socially distanced road trip, and we hit some high points that we could reasonably drive to. And one of the ones that we went to was Mount Greylock in Massachusetts. Beautiful spot. You can day hike to it. You can drive right up to it, which is what we did because we were trying to hit a bunch of high points kind of all in one fell swoop. The AT also goes right up and over Mount Greylock. So you had just an absolute mix of tourists like we were that day hikers, and backpackers, and even through hikers.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone, just to a person, was so considerate of one another. Even with all of the COVID considerations, everyone was very socially distanced. And there's a beautiful area where you can look out and you can see, I think it's something like 5 states that you can see from the top of Mount Greylock. And so everybody's admiring the view. And people were being so considerate about where they were sitting to make sure they weren't blocking someone else's view. And, they would walk out a little bit on these rocks and then they'd turn around and just make sure they weren't bothering anyone. And I thought, this is how it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are times when we are getting it right. So I don't want to sound like I'm, always being kind of a downer. There are moments when I feel like we as human beings get it right. And that day on Mount Greylock was truly a positive experience to just see all these different people with different abilities and different backgrounds and, all coming together in this beautiful spot.
It took us to the end of the episode to get to an example of what positive experience that we've had out there. Very good.
Shame on me for being so negative today.
Well, Lion, I know that you were looking forward to doing the John Muir Trail, and I'm sure you did some research into it. And so I'm going to try and pin you down here and give me a top three list of the top 3 places you're looking forward to most on the John Muir Trail.
Okay. I actually, I've already talked a lot about Mount Whitney, so that feels a little bit like cheating to say that that's something I'm looking forward to.
Well, and you're a high pointer too. I mean, that's just natural now.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I got to check that one off of my list. I got a spreadsheet. Like I said, I love
Of course
planning.
you do. Mm-hmm.
So
That's
I
right.
got a spreadsheet, right? So I got to fill in that block on my spreadsheet. But not only that, we recently got for Christmas, we got an Oculus, which is like a VR system. And I realized, so my son loaded it up with a bunch of games, but I also realized that you can watch videos, and there's like 360 videos out there that you can watch with this VR headset on. And so of course the first thing I looked for was Mount Whitney. And watching this video, I was just getting so excited about that. So yeah, obviously that's kind of the number one thing that I'm looking forward to. And after listening to Oh boy, I wish I could remember. You'll probably remember who it was. One of your guests talked about it was the person who had done the JMT 13, 14 times, and said that his favorite spot was Bighorn Plateau.
Dr. Bob.
Yes. And so I'm looking forward to that spot. And in fact, my friend and I changed our itinerary so that we can hopefully aim to camp in that area
Yeah,
based on that recommendation.
yes. When I got invited to do the southern half of the JMT again this summer, it was Chopper who had made the reservations, and I called Chopper up uh, uh, for the explicit purpose of telling him yes, I would go, and number two, we're camping on Bighorn Plateau this time. So
Yeah, that's a goal of mine for sure after listening to the pod. And I think the other thing, and you know, it may be a little bit cliche, but everything that I hear about Ray Lakes is that, you know, that's the place to be. So we're actually planning a 0 day at Ray Lakes just so that we can spend some time just taking in the sights and, um, you know, take a swim if we can stand it for longer than 30 seconds. And so I'm really looking forward to that spot as well.
well, Lion, you have obviously done your research because I cannot argue with those three picks. Nice job.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, Lion, you know where we are?
Oh boy. Well, I believe we must be at the pro tip insight of the week.
You are a longtime listener. You know when I say that, that's where we are. Exactly. So what little tip or trick do you have to share with our listeners to make their next outdoor adventure even better?
You know, we've really, I mean, we've talked about a lot of things today that I'm really excited and passionate about. But I think one thing that we really didn't get to touch on, and it's because it's not super closely related to Leave No Trace, which obviously has been our focus today. But one thing that's really important to me personally is the idea that um, the outdoors is for everyone. And you can find adventure everywhere you go. And sometimes it can be in the very simple things. So, you know, whether it's just in your own backyard or in a city park, adventure is there and it's waiting for you. And you just have to be open to it and willing to embrace it. Some of my best adventures have been even just a simple trip to, you know, an antique store or to, you know, sitting on a patio at a restaurant and, you know, making up stories about the other people that we see, you know, okay, well, what's that person's name and what do they do for a living and what's their relationship to the other people at the table. And so finding those little adventures in just making up stories about, you know, the places that we find ourselves. And um, you can escape the ordinary, you know, humdrum daily existence um, everywhere you go. And I think that's so important. So no matter what your physical abilities might be, no matter what your experience in the outdoors might be, you can find adventure. It's out there and you just have to embrace it.
It's the new tagline for the podcast. Adventure lives here.
Yes, I love it.
Very good.
Absolutely love it.
So there you have it. That's it. This very important bonus episode for season 2 is in the books. I hope our listeners enjoyed our time with Lion. I want to thank her for joining us this week. Lion, how can our listeners keep up with you on social media, and where can they find updates on your latest adventures, like
Uh,
the Kula uh, bidet
yes.
experience?
So I'm mainly just a Facebook person. So I'm on Facebook with my real name, Heather Kovach, Kovach. So feel free to hit me up there. Technically, I have a Twitter and an Instagram, but I just really don't use them very much. So yeah, find me on Facebook. I'm happy to answer your Leave No Trace questions. You know, point you to some resources if you know want to learn more about it. And I'll definitely share stories of my future adventures with my Kulo Clean and my JMT trips and everything else that's coming up this year.
Nice. And was it difficult to get in touch with me via Facebook?
Not at all. Actually, I was really impressed that I sent you a message and I said, hey, we should talk about Leave No Trace. And I think it took you about 4 minutes to respond and say, yeah, let's do it. So yeah, Facebook's a great place to reach Doc too, guys.
That's right. If you've got great ideas, if you've got suggestions, let me have them. Reach out to me. Let's get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a real pleasure to talk with you, and I hope all of the folks listening and watching have maybe learned some things and gotten some ideas for thinking about the ways that they can impact the environment, because I think that's really what it comes down to is we all have the choice every day about the kind of impact that we're going to make on the world around us. So simple things like when I go into work at the start of my day, how am I going to impact the people that I work with? Am I going to come in with a smile on my face, or am I going to come in going, oh man, I hate being here, I'm so grouchy, right? So I can make an impact on people. I can make an impact on the environment around me. And there's actually, when I do environmental training, when I'm at work, there's a quote that I like to share with people. And it's from Jane Goodall, and she's a primatologist and anthropologist, and she's known for her work with chimpanzees. She's one of my personal heroes. But the quote from her is that you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. And I carry that with me every day, whether it's environmental impact or just how am I going to affect the moods of the people around me. We all get to choose what's our impact going to be. And I think that's a beautiful thing to have that kind of choice.
Well said. Well said. Remember to check out the pod on social media as well. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you have comments or clips you want to share, you can send it to me at johnfreakinmuir@gmail.com. Lion, I'm also looking to you to give our listeners your recommendation for a book, a movie, documentary, website, YouTube channel that will keep them connected to outdoor adventures. We're calling this the Adventure Media Recommendation.
Okay. So I want to kind of go take a little different approach to this. So a lot of the media that people are recommending is trail journals and things like that. And I've certainly, watched my share of YouTube videos and read just some incredible books out there about people's hiking experiences. But truly, I think one of the most influential books about being in the outdoors that I have read is a book called How to Shit in the Woods. And it's by Kathleen Meyer. And it's a great book because it just very plainly spells out literally how to do your business outside the correct way, and gives you lots of different methods to choose from. If you have to pack it out, here's what you can do. Lots of discussion about cat holes, and it's just honestly a really great book. It's very frank, it's very open, it's very entertaining, and it's also incredibly useful. So I think everybody should pick up a copy of How to Shit in the Woods.
Is this about 350 pages or so?
I can't remember for sure how long it is, but it was, believe it or not, but again, we've already established I get excited about waste, and I'm weird that way, right? But to me, it was actually a really great read.
All right, very good. The author one more time?
Kathleen Meyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that one.
Yeah.
That's a first, by the way. Nice job.
Yeah, I wanted to think outside the box a little bit for that one, and that's truly a favorite of mine. So
now that's a wrap from the John Freaking Muir studio. Any shout outs to friends and family, Lion?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I do want to shout out to, Ember now, as
Ember.
she is now known, and to Sue, who are my two original backpacking buddies that we went to Yosemite together. And while we were there, we picked up the name, the BABs, and that's but not that, actually said, but I'm trying to keep it clean since we're talking about leave no trace, although I already said shit. So I guess what are we going to do? So after we climbed Yosemite, you know, we saw somebody on, or climbed the Half Dome in Yosemite. We saw somebody on the trail, and you know, you stop and you talk to people. You know, where are you going? Where have you been? And we said, yeah, we just climbed Half Dome. And this woman just looked at us and she said, "You are a bunch of badass bitches." And so I got a shout out to the badass bitches. And there's now a few other folks that we've brought into that club with us. So shout out to the Badass Bitches Club. And of course, you know, to my kids and to my husband for just being so understanding about my need to be outdoors. It may not be their thing, but they're so supportive. And, you know, my husband, James in particular, is just so understanding. And when I say, you know, I got to go be in the woods for a week, he says, you know, go ahead, I'll hold down the fort. So he's just the greatest guy in the world, and I'm super lucky.
Very good. Thank you for tuning in. Always remember, the trail is the trail. It doesn't care if you want to go downhill. It doesn't care if it's almost dark and you're looking for a campsite. It doesn't even care if you're looking at the cables to Half Dome and you're a badass bitch. The trail is the trail. Embrace the suck.
Embrace the suck.